The recent injury to Bruno Fernandes has made a clear problem at Manchester United even more obvious than ever. United need midfield recruitment. Casemiro is likely to leave in the summer, Ugarte is not at all rated right now, and Kobbie Mainoo is out of favour. And it also turns out Bruno Fernandes can't play 1 billion minutes every season. We know that Manchester United want midfielders, so why not act now? Now, just a little bit of context for today's video. We are not exactly going to be looking at very cheap budget options, but we're also not going to be exceeding the 60 million mark. So I think all of these are somewhat gettable in January and definitely in the summer. First up, we have Alex Scott, a 22-year-old Englishman who currently plays his football for Bournemouth and recently got his first call up to the England national team. Now, I would say that Alex Scott is a player that can play in the 6, the 8 or the 10. He's a very complete midfielder, and that is exactly what we need at Manchester United. We know that Ruben Amorim's system at the best of time demands a lot from the two midfielders, but in recent times has become even more complex. There's been more fluidity, players moving into more different zones. So you need someone that can do that, and Scott absolutely can. However, so can a lot of other midfielders on the market. So the question is, what makes Scott stand out from those guys? For me, the first thing that catches my eye is his dribbling ability. Modern football is incredibly man-to-man, and I think having someone who can dribble can be almost a tactic breaker at times. Now, often we talk about that out wide, someone that can play 1 versus 1 and dribble past someone. But I think it's equally as important, if not more important, in midfield. Because so many teams go man-to-man. If you can win your little 1 versus 1 and beat that player, the opposition now have a problem because there is not a natural player to come and tackle you next. It's also really useful if you're trying to play through a block. Teams these days are very compact, very well drilled, and there's not much space to play in at all. Now, of course, in an ideal world, you want to be patient. You want to pass your way through, you want to pull these players out of position and create space and pass, and that's great. But it's not always possible. Sometimes you need someone who can produce magic by themselves, can beat a player, can beat maybe 2 players, and dribble through to progress the ball. That's something that Scott would bring to United. Now, on top of that, the thing that I like about Alex Scott is his ability to drop a little bit deeper, take responsibility to pick the ball up, and then sort of start spraying the ball forward. We know that Ruben Amorim puts a lot of focus on quite a direct passing game. Not necessarily long ball football, but passes over the top for the forwards to run onto, or big switches out to the wing backs or whoever it may be. He likes his midfielders to be able to pick the ball up and ping it quickly. Basically, because that ball can be passed quicker than it can be dribbled. Scott can do that. Scott is a very nice long passer. I think he's got a really nice detail to his game. The way that he sort of drives the ball out to the far side, I think is really useful and would see him sort of fit like a glove in this Manchester United system. I think he would come into this team and just immediately look like he's at home in the United midfield because of his ability to progress with dribbling and with that longer range passing. However, if I am to be critical for one moment, I think his shorter passing can improve. I think he can control the tempo and the rhythm a little bit better. I think previously in his career, he played a bit more advanced, a bit more as a 10, dropping a little bit deeper. I don't feel that he's picked up that rhythm for the game completely yet. I think sometimes, you know, he's a very composed player, he's a very calm player, he's a very confident player. But sometimes almost too much, sometimes he's a little bit too laid back. I think he can add a sort of a sharpness into his game to re-inject that intensity. Now, if we just finish on a positive for Alex Scott, it's his intensity, mobility and things like that off the ball. I think he's a very good physical Premier League player. Of course, Premier League proven, he's played in the league for a couple of years now, and he doesn't look out of place. He is more than capable of competing physically with pretty much every midfielder in the league. And at times for Bournemouth, we actually see him in a hybrid pressing role, which really shows how good he is in terms of his intensity, his mobility. Because he will sometimes play this role for Bournemouth where he's almost pressing one player, but if a certain pass is played, he's responsible for making that jump to the next player. And he does it very well at Bournemouth. He's one of the key players in the Bournemouth high press, and Scott does it very well. So I think for United, he'd actually be very useful. Next up, Mamadou Sangare, the 23-year-old Mali international who currently plays his football for Lens in France. Now, I see Sangare as a sort of a 6 or an 8. He's not a creative midfielder, you know, he's not a high 10. He's someone who is maybe a sort of holding and protective midfielder, maybe a box-to-box midfielder. And the reason why I say maybe box-to-box is because his ball-playing ability is very nice. He's a left-footed central midfielder, but what I like about him is the way that he adjusts his balance. Now, I wouldn't go as far as saying he's a true dribbler in midfield, but I think he's got a lovely ability to separate himself from the opposition, to work himself half a yard, to get that little bit of space. He sort of draws the opposition into him, then takes a spring touch away to open up that little bit of space to operate in. That's something that United could use in midfield. There's a lot of situations where we get a little bit stuck around the back, and when we go into midfield, someone like Casemiro is good on the ball, of course he is. He's a good passer and things like that. But he doesn't have that ability to drop the shoulder and work that little bit of space. He doesn't have the mobility and then the acceleration to get away into that space. I think Sangare does, and that would add something to the United midfield. Almost a security under pressure, but also more ability to progress the ball and work space as well. Now, the other thing that is nice here is that Sangare is actually a left-footed central midfielder, the only one that we're going to be looking at in today's video. But it's something that United don't have. We speak about this quite a lot. All the players that we play in this zone are all right-footed midfielders, which isn't a bad thing. It's not the end of the world. All footballers should be two-footed to an extent, but players do tend to play to their stronger foot. Of course they do. So having a left footer would give United a little bit of a different dynamic, a different way sometimes to access the inside of the pitch, and also a different way at times to access the outside of the pitch. It's someone who plays with a different instinct, a different tempo, and that's what United need. I think at times under Amorim, United are quite predictable with the way that we're going to play, and a lot of that is tactical, but also some of that is player-based as well, because we've got players with similar instincts. I think Sangare almost goes against those instincts a little bit. Being left-footed, he almost takes United the other way, which adds an element of unpredictability to the way that we play in the middle. And then, of course, important for an Amorim midfielder, his long passing range. He's a very good switcher of the ball. He drives that ball out to the far side. And again, with the wing-backs as high as possible, that is something that United will continue to use. And the other great thing about Sangare, well, he's a really good ball-winning midfielder, a sort of long-legged dueler. Now, not necessarily absolutely rapid, but because his stride length is so big, he just sort of eats up the ground quite comfortably. He's very good at recovering and then using those long legs to make a tackle. And in the Premier League, when it gets so tight at times, you need that. You need your midfielders to be able to reach out a long leg to poke the ball away from the opposition, or to drag the ball away from the opposition. Sangare is really good at doing that, really good at disrupting the opposition midfield, and I think he would be probably one of the cheapest options on the list today. Next up, Lamine Camara, 21 years old, currently playing his football for Monaco and representing the Senegal national team. Now, Camara is a player that I would say is an 8, not so much a 6, maybe someone that could branch into being a 10, but for me, I see him as an 8. What is he as a midfielder? What makes him stand out from a lot of other options? I think he's quite press resistant in the first phase, and that is something that Manchester United absolutely need. Because, you know, as much as United have improved under Amorim this season, it weren't difficult to do so, but we have made a little bit of progress. One thing we're still not very good at is actually moving out in the first phase. We are quite predictable and blatantly just poor, to be honest. Part of that is because of the structure. You know, we've got the centre-back split wide and a centre-back goes into midfielder. But also because the midfielders that then drop in just aren't press-resistant in the first phase. We've got Kobe, but we don't use him. Kamara is a player that we could use in that position. Someone who could take the ball under pressure, and he's a very intelligent footballer. He always feels like he's sort of a step ahead of the opposition. He's always got his head on a swivel. He's scanning well. So by the time that he receives the ball, he knows where the opposition are. So he can turn away from pressure. He can make sure that he takes his first touch away from the opponent. Or he can sort of take his first touch to draw the opponent in and then burst past them. That's something that he does very well. A sort of press-resistant midfielder, and United need that. As we move a little bit further forward, I think he's, again, an intelligent player. A player with the understanding of tempo and temperament. He's not someone who is just repeatedly going to launch the ball forward and try and play Hollywood passes every time he gets the ball. He's someone who does appreciate the fact that sometimes you just have to keep possession. And again, if we're talking about balance, if we are changing some of the instincts in the Manchester United midfield, having someone who has that knowledge, that ability also to not be too emotional, but to sort of relax himself in the moment and make that decision that yes, we need to keep the ball now, rather than launching forward, well, that would be really useful. We've been crying out for that player. We don't use it when we do have it in Kobe Manu. But with Camara, if he was to come into the team, that is something that he would bring. And again, as with everyone on this list today, it is worth going over. Camara is also a good long passer. And probably the thing that makes him stand out from the others today is that he can do it with both feet. So he is more naturally right-footed, but he can also pick the ball up on his left foot and spray it to both sides. And again, it's that long drive to the far side, which is great for keeping up the speed of the attack. If you play a ball that is too floated, too lofted, it's easy for the opposition to get out to the player and maybe go and win the ball in the air, or set themselves in a very nice defensive position. Whereas when you can drive that ball to the far side, when you can drive the switch, it really gives the attacker the advantage because it puts the opponent right on the back foot. So Camara is ticking one of the important boxes for Ruben Amorim. And if we're talking about important boxes, it's the way that you defend. Now, I don't think Camara is an elite ball-winning midfielder. Of course, he's still very young, so he could grow to be one. But this is where I say I don't think he's a 6, because I don't think he's that sort of holding, screening, protecting midfielder. I think he's someone who wants to jump out, he wants to get involved, he wants to be scrappy, he wants to get involved in lots of fights, lots of duels to try and sort of snuff out the opposition. Now, the good thing is he doesn't do that at the expense of protecting his own goal. He's not going to go out and look for a fight for the sake of it. He is still protecting his goal. That's his main objective, which is important. But yeah, I don't see him as a screener. I see him as a sort of jumper, someone who wants to try and be aggressive when we can, try and play man-to-man when we can, which again makes him a really interesting option. The final player for today is Ruben Neves, 28 years old, currently playing his football for Al Hilal and still representing the Portugal national team. Now, Ruben Neves is a player that we would describe as a 6 or an 8, and a lot of you will be very familiar with his game because at one point he was one of the best young midfielders in the world when he first moved to Wolves and had so much promise, so much potential. What makes him stand out from the rest? It's his long passing, which is weird to say because everyone today has been pretty good at long passing, but Neves is sort of next level. His long pass is almost unrivaled, to be honest. He is just absolutely fantastic at driving the ball. Driving that ball, fizzing that pass to the far side. The way that he sort of cuts across the ball nicely, drives it out to his teammate. It's always a nice ball to control. Real empathy on the way that he passes the ball along. It's not like an absolute missile coming in that's impossible to control. It's nice to receive the ball. And I think that's what really is the unique selling point with Neves. His long passing is sort of on a different level, different caliber to most other players. That also, though, that ball striking is also something it uses in the final third. Now, not something that we've spoken about so much today, but Manchester United, where possible, want goals from midfield. You know, Bruno Fernandes always scores a lot, as does Casemiro. Neves is someone who chips in with that, with set pieces, first of all, you know, ball striking on corners, for example, and direct free kicks, but also long-range shooting ability. United often find themselves up against a low block, and a team are sort of compact and get loads of numbers behind the ball. Having a player who can shoot from distance is never going to be a bad thing to try and break that down. Now, I guess the only concern would be how that balances with the others, because we've already got a few players that quite like that long shot, but I think Neves would add to it and he would be another player that can do it. I think, though, if we go back a bit, if we sort of take a couple of steps backwards and go a little bit deeper in the play, what's interesting with Neves is the potential tactical flexibility he gives you. We've spoken about Ruben Amorim occasionally building with a back four recently. And a way to do that, a way to achieve that, is to drop your midfielder into the back line. That is absolutely something that Ruben Neves can do. Or what he can do is he could play in a back four. So let's say Manchester United are set up in a traditional back four. Let's just go, ignore the rest of the personnel. Let's say United are in a back four like this, but Amorim still wants to build possession with a back three. Neves is the sort of player that can drop in between your two centre-backs and sort of release those fullbacks further forward. He gives us a different solution, a different way to move into the same shape. And obviously, again, from that position, he's facing the play. And when you've got a player with that passing range, that ability to go long, sitting there with everything in front of you, is amazing. It's such a great position for him to sort of paint a picture and, again, just spray those passes out. The criticism I would have for Neves is, of course, has his level dropped, moving to an easier league, a weaker league. That's something that we would have to assess. Like all of these players, I need to watch a lot more. But I think my bigger concern with Neves would be, considering his passing is sort of the thing you like about him, for me it's sort of restricted to long passing. When I look at his shorter game, he's a decent short passer. Of course, he can play between the lines and he can knock the ball about. But I don't think he's amazing. I don't think he's some fantastically brilliant, incredible short passer. He's not, again, a player who has an amazing sense of the rhythm of the game. He's not someone who dictates the game with his passing, I don't think. He's very direct, very forward-thinking. If you want someone to control the game, I don't think it's Neves. But if you are looking for that quite direct style, which Amorim likes sometimes, then Neves might be a guy. So yes, that is 4 different midfielders that Manchester United should be looking at and probably are looking at this January, and also potentially with an eye towards the summer as well. I'm confident in the year of 2026 United will sign at least 2 midfielders. One of them probably is going to have to be a slightly cheaper option, and then the other one will be that more established player. These guys, these four, as the slightly cheaper option, are all really nice players that would drastically improve the Manchester United squad without probably demanding a place in the starting 11 every week. You know, they're not sort of that high caliber of player. They're not the biggest names in the world. So they might be a bit more content at times to have some time on the bench. Hopefully we're going to be in European competitions next season, so we're going to need as much midfield depth as we can get. All of these guys add a lot of depth, a lot of quality, but also something different to what the current United midfielders possess. So that's why I like all of them, but I want to hear who you like the most. Give me your order, 1, 2, 3, 4, out of these guys today. How would you rank them in terms of how likely they are to sign for United, but also how much you would like them at the club? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. But apart from that, we are now finished for today's video. So thank you guys very much for watching it. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.